Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, the groups aren't able to communicate with each other. They're trying to use the radios, but that's not working, which I love that being a whole thing of like, whoa, that's something you don't have to plug in. Like, oh, because even Freddie been like, he's so stupid. Oh, you call him an inventor? Obviously, he's not that smart, because like, obviously you have to plug it in. You have to plug it in. He's like, oh, like, I didn't know who I was talking. Like, Deke was responding him to like a condescending tone, and he put on a little bit of an accent when he was talking back to him. But nevertheless, obviously their job is to protect Freddy. But the whole thing is like, well, what the hell does Freddy have? Like, why are the Chronocoms so intent on killing you? Like, why are you so important? You know, so they're trying to figure that out. Obviously, the Chronocoms show up because Simmons and Yo-Yo showed up as well, and then they find out about the whole Malik situation, but now they can't warn him about it. So they can't warn Mac and Deke about it. So it's like, what can they do? Now the Chronocoms show up. Obviously they're hiding. The Hydra lady ends up waking up, knocking down a bottle. What was really interesting though is Yo-Yo, it slows down. I was like, oh, Yo-Yo's going to catch it. And I halfway expect her to run and get it, but then something like glitches with her power son, but she doesn't move at all. And then like later on, Daisy brings that up and she's like, yeah, I didn't see it coming. She's like, oh, I'm surprised. She's like, because you were staring straight at it. She's like, I couldn't move. And Daisy's like, why is that? She's like, I don't know. Like, maybe it's because of the Shrike that's still inside me. Maybe that did something. Maybe our own fears about, that. I don't know, because part of me is like, do you think it's like a time thing that's kind of messing with her powers, or like to be fair, like she's a metahuman that was possessed by a Shrike, so I'm like, do you think it has some kind of effect on her? But it seemed like her, like, because it slowed down, so it seemed like it's more like a psychological thing, like she was just scared to move. So that's what I'm wondering. Is it more of a psychological thing? Because it looked like time did slow down, like her powers were kicking in. It's just she didn't move, So that was like, oh, that's interesting. And even later on, she kind of gets benched later on by Daisy being like, no, you stay here just in case, things go down. So it's like, that's interesting. But Simmons ends up examining the substance because he finds it on the lady's shoe. I also love Koenig being there being like, what's going on? What are you guys talking about? And the fact of the matter, he's constantly referring to Gemma as like a bird and stuff like that. She's like, I'm not a bird, I'm a bio, like she's like, I got this science shit on lock. And he's looking at, holy crap, so she really knows her onions. And I'm like, was that a phrase back in the day? Oh, someone knows their onions? Okay. But the fact of the matter is she figures out what this stuff was, and it's like, interestingly enough, it's the key component to the super soldier serum, because it's like, oh, this person, it was developed by this person, and around this time it got sent to this person, which is like, that's Red Skull. I was like, Red Skull? Yeah, what? I was like, okay. So obviously, because this is the history of the MCU, they can like do stuff like that. Like obviously, sadly, present day, obviously they can't do that too much, but obviously this is part of the history that's already established, so they can kind of do that without worrying about too much. I'm like, okay. And then they're like, yeah, this is the key component to the super soldier serum. I'm like, oh, so interesting. So you need to kind of let this go through, because if you don't, they didn't bring this up maybe because they legitimately couldn't, but I'm like, one of the arguments would be like, well, if we didn't let things go down, like there would actually be no Captain America, considering this but to be fair, this is probably about, Hydra getting their hands on it, but that in tow would be, because in my head, like I was thinking like more so the effect of Hydra was a part of S.H.I.E.L.D. for such a long time. I didn't think about the aspect of, right, S.H.I.E.L.D. came about to fight Hydra. So it's just, I didn't even think about that part. I just thought about, like, we know, to be fair, that's still a true component as well. Like, S.H.I.E.L.D. wouldn't be where it is right now, be a lot less complicated, but, like, things along the route are the reason, like, Hydra being a part of S.H.I.E.L.D., hell, because of that, you got Ward as part of S.H.I.E.L.D. Granted, that led to a lot of people dying too, but you get what I'm trying to say. So it's an interesting thing, because it brings up that conundrum of like, do we really have to save Hydra? This would be the perfect time to snuff it out. But, Coulson's like, no, we have to keep the timeline as close as possible. I get it. You want to change things because it's like, why do we have to? Because they're even saying like, what if we, change Freddy's heart or whatever? And it's like, well, that's, an aspect of time travel. But it's like, you can't, because we need things to stay the same. Because yes, there's bad stuff that came about for Hydra. But if it wasn't for Hydra, S.H.I.E.L.D. wouldn't exist. And we need S.H.I.E.L.D. to exist, because without S.H.I.E.L.D. existing, so much stuff like, all these ducks have to go in a certain row, because eventually this would also mean if we didn't have this, wouldn't have Captain America, wouldn't have the Avengers. So much in history would be different, and that's the thing. It's like you don't know what the ripples are. You don't know how everything can end up changing, and that was also the other side of it. We don't know how things could change. Things could change way for the better. Like get rid of like one of history's worst groups, Hydra. But to be fair, it's like. But you don't know what kind of effect that would happen on them. Like this team, S.H.I.E.L.D. might not exist. This family might not exist if you change that future, So it's like, and I mean, maybe that would be the complicated thing. And I don't see that happening, considering the fact that S.H.I.E.L.D. is such a staple in the Marvel universe that I wouldn't think you'd undo it by. But I'm saying that at the end of the day, doing all this time travel stuff, this team could end up being undone. And basically they all like, we see them in alternate world where it's like, oh, their lives went down completely different paths. But it's like, it would, in a way, almost undoing everything that's ever happened over the course of this series, or maybe up to a certain point. I don't know what to really expect about it. I would assume that it's basically going to pick up after the VIDS of season 6 to a certain extent. So like everything this season will kind of be undone, or rather the present will go back to the way it's supposed to be, and this stuff will have happened, but everyone, so I don't know. Like I said, I'm thinking way in advance, but that's the complicated thing. But like I said, I just thought it was interesting. No one ever brought up the whole Captain America situation. I was like, I guess because it's like eventually we would have gotten there on our own, but it's just Hydra got there. I guess that's the argument behind it. But nevertheless, obviously, like Mac and Deke are still with Freddy, and obviously he's like, no, like you've done what you needed to do. I need to handle this on my own, but they go with him because it's like our job is to protect you. And I love that whole thing. He's like, wow, so you did make this on here? So you're pretty smart. He's like, I mean, I wouldn't use smart, but that's the only word that can describe me, so I guess I am smart. And Mac's over there like, oh, Jesus. It's like the last thing you want is Deke to have an even bigger ego. But the fact of the matter is, like, for... it's sad because, like, you learn a little bit about Freddy. Like, the reason why his dad died, his dad killed himself after the stock market crash, because it was like he put everything in it, and because of that, he killed himself. His mom apparently like kind of went a little crazy, and she hasn't said anything for the past 2 years. So everything Freddy's doing is because he wants to make a name for himself, because in his mind it's like, oh, I'm not going to go out like my dad. I'm gonna go out on top. Like, I'm not going to just like fall apart like my dad is. I'm gonna make a name for myself, and the lady that dropped it off, she's someone that knew him. It's like, no, I'm gonna give Freddy a chance to kind of rise up and prove himself. That's what this is. So it's interesting to see, like, this was kind of the starting point that would eventually lead the Maliks to kind of be the head of Hydra and everything. So it's interesting how that all works out in the long run. But at the same time, it is just it's a good complicated situation, especially when we get to what we get to later on in the episode, but I'll get to it soon enough. At the same time, all this is happening. It's like, oh yeah, May's awake, and Gemma's like, no, she shouldn't be awake. Okay, something might be wrong. Try to get her back to sleep, and he's talking to her. It's like, yeah, she probably isn't too keen on following orders. And just like her demeanor is so interesting, because it's like, he's like, okay, like I'm Enoch, we met in a different timeline, and apparently we were allies and everything. Well, this is by Gemma, she thinks it will help you. And then like May injects him with it. I'm like, oh, he about to fall asleep. But it's like, oh no, he doesn't. I guess luckily it's a sedative for a human, not a chronocom. So it's a thing of like, he's fine, and he's explaining what's going on. It's like, okay, and you're far from home. It's like, are we different galaxy? It's like, right. At first I was like, oh, you're saying that so like nonchalantly and stuff like that, but it's like, oh right, in the grand scheme of things, it's like, well, you've been far from home before, so it's not like it's that technically new to you to a certain extent, but still. Granted, the fact of the matter is, it's like, nope, obviously you travel to the future and stuff like that, but nope, we're in the past. This is 1931, that you're in this year. You can't really go outside, because she's like, no, I want to go help. Well, at first, it's like, she's just acting like super different and stuff like that. She's acting a little, it's like, oh, how are you feeling? She's like, I'm feeling nothing. I'm like, oh, that's not a good sign. I'm like, and then like the way she's acting later, I'm like, her humanity switched off. Like, whatever it is that happened to her, like dying, like it broke her in some shape or form, or maybe the technology bringing her back. I was like, because at first I was like, the way she's acting is very like Chronocomish. She's acting a little like personality wise like Enoch. So I'm like, did that make her a little more machine than human or something? Or at the very least, like some like part of her humanity is gone. And it seemed like, I guess like maybe bringing her back, like some kind of switch got flipped in her head, you know, using like Vampire Diaries standards as an example of, you know, the flipping the switch and everything. But regardless, tangents and all that. But what I thought was interesting though is like the way it was almost creepy, like Enoch was talking on the radio about like, oh yeah, and then like he turns and then like she's going, I was like, ooh, that was super creepy. I was like, what the hell is up with that? But then she's like, oh, I'm gonna leave, because for her it's like her job is to protect, and it's like I said, she was almost like a robot. She's almost like Terminator-ish, and that's kind of what I expected with her dress like that and acting like. I was like, oh, she's going all Terminator, isn't she? And she's like, oh, it's my job to protect him, so I gotta go do my job. And Enoch was like, oh, you can't really do that. I need to stop you. She's like, you're not gonna get in my way. You don't have the guts to pull the trigger. He's like, actually, you're right. I don't have the intestinal lining, but I do have what it takes to pull the. And she hits him. She's about to take off, and then he goes fighting her, because for him, he's like, well, because I knew I'm going to need the hunter level skills for this mission and everything, so I'm ready to fight. So him and May fight, and I mean, to be fair, you're going up against Melinda May, the badass amongst badasses in S.H.I.E.L.D. Like, of course, it was only going to go one way. She messes Enoch up, like, and her taking that fire hydrant, bashing his head. I was like, oh, that's pretty brutal. Luckily, everyone's pulling up at the same time, but I'm like, that is gnarly. I love they had to bring Koenig as well, because he was like, no, wherever you're going, I want answers. I want to find out what happened to Freddy. But obviously, they show up, and she's bashing on him, and Coulson's like, May, stop. And she's like, Coulson, and she's like, wait, you're not. And he's like, no, I'm not. And she's like, but you're not Coulson. He's like, yes and no. But the fact of the matter is, you know, she's, what was it that it's like, you know, she's like, because he's trying to be like, but the fact of the matter is I died. And she's like, yeah, and you're still dead, and just walks away. And everyone else is like, what the hell was that? She didn't even react. Like, because even I was like, oh, what's going to happen when May finds out about Coulson? Apparently nothing. She just like, okay, you want to sedate me? Sure. And it's just like, because I guess for her, it's like, well, you guys are back. I guess everything's under control. So it's like her instincts are what's driving her, like all like emotional ties and stuff. So even her feelings for Coulson, like whatever it is, like she got hollowed out. And it's like, how did that happen? Why did that happen? We still don't know. But I'm like, that's definitely going to present a very interesting situation going forward. Because I think we can probably, at least for a while, probably expect her to be kind of, like, you know, not having her emotions like that. So that's definitely going to be interesting. So, and then I love they revealed, okay, Koenig, welcome to our gig. He's like, oh yeah, fine. It's going to be nothing. He's like, oh, dude. He starts hyperventilating because he's tripping out. He's like, what? This is the inside of a rocket ship, and that's one of those like metallic men, or what do you go? Oh, a robot. This is a robot. He's like, I'm not a robot. I'm a Chronicon. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go fix my face. And he's just losing his shit. And it's just like, wait, I get it. First he was like, you're aliens. They're like, no, we're not aliens. We might seem like Martians from time to time, but no, we're not. And it's like, all right, here's the skitty. We're from the future. And it's like, wait, what? This and that. And he's just kind of like being caught up on everything. At the same time, Freddy and, the Mac and Deke, it's a whole situation of like, well, first they end up finding out, wait, there's a whole time thing happening right now. We need to, the ship is about to do an automatic jump. It's like, wait, why did you tell us about that before? I didn't know, because the fact of the matter is these things happen at random times. Like it could, because I guess it's kind of like, it's this perfect window of when these, like I guess it's almost like everything aligns in just the right way to make time travel possible. I mean, to be fair, they're time traveling off the coattails of these tides that, that Gemma brought up last episode that, that Fitz named. And I'm so interested when we actually get to finally see Fitz, because obviously we haven't seen him at all this season, but regardless. But the fact of the matter is, they have a limited amount of time, so it's like, okay, we got to get to Freddy and stuff like that. So Daisy calls them up, and it's just like, all right, Mac is looking through the bottles trying to figure out what they're transporting and everything. But then it's a thing of like, it's like, oh, he's a good kid and everything. It's like, wait, you got a gun? It's like, yeah. She's like, pull the trigger on him. He's like, wait, what? She's like, you don't no, he seems like a good kid. You need to pull the trigger on him. He's going to be responsible if there's so many deaths. You got to do this. Especially coming from a situation where Deke is a time traveler. He's from a future. He's from a terrible future. in the sense of like, oh yeah, some terrible shit went down, obviously in the timeline he's from. So he can understand that thing of like, if I could make it so that my future didn't happen, which obviously it didn't happen. So he knows all about saving the future and stuff like that. So, but that's a heavy ass burden you're asking, because he's like, he's just a kid. But it's like, once again, I don't know if there's a proper terminology for this. It's the whole Hitler conundrum. Like, if you had the possibility to go back in time and kill Hitler, would you kill Hitler? You know, a lot of people say yes, but that's also the thing of time travel. It's the whole butterfly effect. You don't know the ripples. I mean, that's what we're dealing with in this situation too. So it's a thing, but it's also like, once again, if you had an opportunity, would you kill baby Hitler? This is even what Koenig said. He's like, well, you can't blame someone for something they haven't even done yet. It's like, yes, but it's like, that's the complicated conundrum that is time travel. Like, do you kill baby Hitler even though Hitler is just a baby? He's innocent in this moment, but you still know what he's destined to grow up and become the monster he was. So it's like, what do you do? You know? Because even then, it's like, even if you remove Hitler from the equation, who's to say life is going to necessarily play out a certain way? Because like, you never know, someone even worse and a different, maybe you could, the argument could be someone worse could take up. You just don't know. Maybe things could work out for the best. It's just a whole bunch of maybes. And so Deke pulls the gun, but Mac is like, no, don't do that. Because initially Daisy was like, no, we can't make this decision at first, like about the whole, like what to do about the whole Freddy situation, because it's like, Coulson, it's not your orders, it's up to Mac, and he doesn't have all the information yet. But Daisy kind of told him, it's like, while you have this opportunity to do it, put him down. And it's just like, you kind of went against what you were a little hypocritical, but I get it. It's like, we're talking about Hydra here, so understandable. But at the end of the day, like, Deke couldn't do it. It's like, he felt bad for Fred, because he was like, this is a kid who's just down on his luck, because he feels like this is the only way to bring meaning to his life, make himself somebody. So he's willing to do whatever it takes. So, but the Chronocons show up, turns into a gunfight. They run. Koenig as well as Enoch try to go after him, and Koenig try to stop him, Freddy, but Freddy, and he's like, you're not gonna pull the trigger. Freddy shot him, and he's like, don't act like you know me. You're not me. He's like, because he was saying, don't make the same mistakes your father did. He's like, that's why I'm doing this. Like, so, but I guess what Koenig was trying to get at was like, don't do something right now that you will regret forever. Don't make a decision in this very moment. Like, but for him, he's like, I have the chance to be somebody, so I'm gonna do it. So now that's kind of set in stone. So obviously the Chronocons leave, because they're like, there's no point in staying here, because the fact of the matter is that our opportunity to remove that threat is gone. So that's kind of set in motion. So it's like, all right, everybody, we got to get back to the Zephyr now before time bounces. And they're like, wait, we're against the clock. Oh, there's Enoch. Run, Enoch. Come on, you can do it. You can make it. They leave. And I'm like, well, Enoch's an alien. Well, he's a machine alien, but I'm like, he doesn't age, so he could actually wait here for wherever time period for you to pop up in. If he wanted to, he could actually be there waiting for you present day, because also the Chronocons aren't there anymore because they left this time period. So I was like, what is he gonna do? And he goes back with Koenig about the whole thing, and I'm like, he's at the bar, he's like, yeah, here's a great drink. I was like, oh man, he's like, all right, for one, he was like, no, first tell me more about S.H.I.E.L.D. He's like, I feel like I do a lot for this organization. You're like, okay, there we go. And then he's also like, also I want to know about you, your robots. He was Chronocons. It's like, right. He's like, the fact of the matter is, it's like, I think it would be kind of interesting to know about. And he's like, yeah, your children would know about this. He's like, my grandchildren? I was also like, okay, so this is how that whole, like, how that situation happened with his family. Is like, are we actually finding the discovery of it because Enoch got left back in time, and that led to Koenig's family becoming tied to S.H.I.E.L.D. the way they are, but also like the whole role. I'm like, is that how this is supposed to happen? Is like, are we kind of getting backstory inadvertently about how that came to be? So that's interesting. I'm also curious, like I said, like how the situation is going to be when the team eventually meets up with him. Like I said, because I don't think his species age. They are like alien machine, so it's like a thing of like, all right, so he'll eventually meet them at some point in time, so that's going to be interesting. I'm so curious to see where this goes, what the next thread is that the Chronocons go after, because obviously this is all about destroying S.H.I.E.L.D. They have to go at specific points in history to kind of strike, to kind of undo it and everything. So, because that was my wonder too, like how much time traveling they were really going to do. Well, it seems like we're going to do probably quite a bit, maybe, I don't know, that depends on how everything kind of ends up shaking out over the course of the season. But I'm very interested to see where all this takes us, like everything with Enoch and Koenig, as well as this whole May situation. It's like, what the hell is that about? There's also got to bring up the whole thing about, oh yo, Daisy, you were telling Deke to pull the trigger on Freddy? Yeah, like they haven't had a chance to really deal with that, but I'm like, you gotta have to talk about that, aren't you? You're going to, because like you're probably going to be in that same situation again of like, are you really going to cross that line? Obviously Mac is, because Mac, I feel like out of anyone in S.H.I.E.L.D., he's got the biggest conscience, he's got the biggest heart, he wears his heart on his sleeve. So you know, Mac, you know where Mac kind of stands on that. So I'm curious to see if that ends up becoming a discussion or not. I would think it'd be an interesting discussion, because once again, it's a whole time travel conundrum in itself. But nevertheless, like I said, very, very, very interested to see where the next episode takes us with this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good